Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. If I can bring your conversations to a close, do find a seat, grab a seat, because we're ready to get cracking with another conversation here on the Tech and Innovation stage. Plenty of places to perch for what should be a fantastic next session, bringing together a world-renowned platform and a world-renowned rights holder to discuss best practice for connecting effectively with your audience and doing so ultimately to monetize them as well. This session has been put together with the help of LiveLike, which is on a mission to convert passive audiences into engaged communities. We're going to be hearing a bit more about that. And we have three experts with us to pore over this topic. So please welcome to the stage Alexandra Willis, Communications and Marketing Director at the All England Lawn Tennis Club, Wimbledon. Mihir Walavalka, the CEO of LiveLike, and Snapchat's Head of Sports Partnerships, Anmol Malhotra. Very good to see you all. Thanks ever so much for joining us. The title of this session is Empower Your Audience, Increase Retention and Monetize the Online Experience. As usual, we are inviting your questions throughout slido.com, S-L-I-D-O, to ask a question. Hashtag leaders is the code you need, or the easiest way to do it is by downloading the official Leaders app and clicking on speaker interaction, and your questions will come directly to us. Empowering that audience and empowering the audience more generally. And I would like to start just by asking each of you what that phrase, empowering your audience, means to you. And I'm going to start with you, Anmol Malhotra.
Before I get started, before you introduce LiveLike and Wimbledon, I would like to introduce Snapchat as well. It's also a world-renowned social network. Just wanted to make sure that you give Anmol his due there.
I think he said that.
I also said that. I definitely also said that, Mihir, but thank you.
Thanks, Mihir.
Bit of extra publicity for you,
yes,
as if you need it.
Thank you. So I think when we think about empowering our audience, we have three key pillars on Snapchat. We start with our camera. So our app opens to the camera, and we give our users lenses, filters, and AR experiences to interact with the world and express their perspective. We have over 200 million people that use our lens experiences every single day. The second pillar is messaging and communication. So we want to make sure that we are an authentic place to express yourself with your best friends and family. There are over 5 billion snaps sent and received every single day. Pretty remarkable number. And then last is content. So how do we inform our user base, inform Snapchatters about the world, let them have fun and entertain themselves? And today we have over 87 million Snapchatters that watch sports content every day across the platform. So those are kind of our three pillars of how we think about empowering people on Snap.
Alex, the Wimbledon empowering your audience philosophy.
I'm not even going to try and follow Anmol's numbers, so I'll just start there. And can I just start by saying what an amazing thing it is to be in a room with lots of people talking to you all. I've completely forgot how to dress for these things because I'm so used to just sitting on my computer screen. So I think for us, and apologies to throw in a buzzword, I think for us, empowering our audience means making our product relevant to them and giving them their way in and their opportunity to share what it means to them through all the brilliant platforms that exist. And I think we've made a big shift in that in the last 18 months, through everything that we've all been through to try and put Wimbledon in the hands of the fans rather than just preach to them about what Wimbledon is.
Somebody, Alex, who has remembered how to dress for these things is Mihir. Is it a jacket? Is it a QR code? Who can say?
I have not heard that one before. That's a good one.
Tell us about empowering. Don't tell us about the jacket. Tell us about empowering your audience and what that means from a LiveLike perspective.
So look, for our job is to make innovation tools available to everyone. So when Anmol talks about how their users interact, messaging, communication, AR filters, I think today's audience has grown up with a plethora of choice in terms of interactions, whether you're working on, using WhatsApp or Twitch or Snap or TikTok. I think today's audience is sort of, and it's not just today's audience, everyone today, especially because of the last 18 months, have sort of gotten used to the idea of doing things in their own way, on their own terms. It's no longer about passive lean back viewing experiences as much anymore. And so what we think about when we say empower your audience to our partners, it's bring those types of interactions into your owned and operated platforms. Don't always rely on social networks to help you, to empower your audience. So there are 3 ways we do that. We provide community tools. So if you want to, watch with friends, watch with influencers, or just be a part of a larger community of Wimbledon fans, engage them on your own platform in your own terms, whether that's free-to-play games, whether that's just simple surveys, emotions, sentiment analysis, etc. And then the last piece is reward them for their interactions. Create incentives for behaviors that matter to you. Wimbledon might want to have engagement year-round and not just during the 2 weeks. How do you get people to do that? How do you reward them for that? So we're making these tools accessible to anyone and everyone who wants to build that into their own platforms.
Anmol, give us a sense of, from a Snapchat perspective, how the general approach to the online experience has changed. Obviously, you have, over the past few years, introduced new features to the service. You've also worked on some very extensive content partnerships. If you look at something like the NBC relationship with the Olympics, for example. Yep. Tell us about the evolution.
Yeah, so we've changed a ton, and I think the nature of our platform is to be dynamic and innovative over time. So I'd say probably 5 or 6 years ago, our main strategy was matchup based on sports content. So think Liverpool versus Man City, Knicks versus Lakers, Rafa versus Federer. And what we found when we covered stories that way is if you were huge fans of those teams and those players, we had incredible engagement in an audience. But if you weren't, you didn't really care that much. And what we evolved over time was really focused on everything else. The pregame, the postgame, the fans, the locker room. I think for young people, particularly Snapchat audience, they might care more about the build up to the game and what's happening around the game. So our focus became tailgates, locker room content. We love that first row snap from a stadium. We also love that last row snap. How do we give our audience a 360 experience, what it feels like to actually be there? And that was a huge change. And I think the key to that sort of strategy was not focusing on people like us, hardcore sports fans, actually thinking about the casual fan, right? The person who does not know who LeBron James is or Messi or Serena, but kind of catering to that type of audience and thinking about how can we pique that person's curiosity to come to Snapchat and watch content on a daily basis.
And if you take something like the NBC relationship, the relationship with the broadcast rights holder,
yep.
That's, well, you tell me, is that something different again in terms of working together to create original, more produced content? And how does that sort of fit in?
Yeah, so from a broadcast standpoint, I think what's exciting for us is that we feel that we're very complementary to the broadcast experience, linear experience. So NBC is a great example. We worked with them since Rio in 2016, and thinking about how we can amplify their initiatives on Snapchat. And one of the points you mentioned earlier was, I think a big misconception about sports on Snapchat is it's just content. We really evolved to AR, creative tools, camera marketing opportunities, and we work with NBC. We find ways to make their storylines, their experiences amplified to our audience through those tools. So I think it's similar in the sense. I think NBC brings, experience and all of this unbelievable content and storylines that they create from a linear perspective primarily. And then kind of finding that sort of partnership and relationship where we can kind of collaborate and make that make sense for Snapchat. So instead of 30-minute shows or hour shows, it's 3 to 5 minutes. Instead of hosts wearing suits and ties and nice jackets like me here, it's younger folks with jeans and t-shirts talking to the Snapchat audience from a host standpoint and really making it fast, high energy, and incorporating a lot of different elements to make it fun for a young person.
A phrase that probably everybody in this room uses internally within their own organizations is test and learn.
Yeah.
When you are of a size of company and of a user base as Snapchat, 87 million viewers of sports content.
On a monthly basis,
On a monthly basis. Does test and learn still hold as a concept? How risk-taking can you be? How cautious do you have to be?
Yeah, so I'll give an example with Alex, actually. Our first partner in Europe, our first sports coverage was with Wimbledon, and I'm sure when we went to Alex and said we want to cover UGC on the grounds, her eyes probably rolled back and said we could never do that. So we want to take the risk in the sense of we're trying to be proactive about the next generation of fans, right? So what are young people going to think about a year from now, 5 years from now? And that's really our goal. And I think it's a nice balance between traditional broadcasters, leagues, and rights holders understanding how their sport works and their audience versus Snap thinking about how the next new young fan is kind of coming there. So test and learn is super important for us, and just understanding our audience, right? I think it's one thing we always say is that our deal with Alex and team, our deal with ESPN, our deal with the NBC 5 years ago just looks foreign today by design, right? It shouldn't be the same thing. And we learned so much from just looking at one piece of content, one event, one game, and using those learnings and listening to our audience about what they actually like and they resonate with is really, really important. And yeah, with these guys, I mean, we did a live story, I think back in 2015 or 16, our first live story over here in Europe, and curating content from fans on the grounds was crazy, right? It was like the first time we saw thousands of snaps coming in, and we learned so much from that point forward.
And Alex, from Wimbledon's point of view, I guess a similar question around that test and learn philosophy, because I know one of the things that you've talked about before is the heritage, the tradition, everything we know and love about Wimbledon, and bringing in the right way new technologies, new ways to consume and to modernize. What's your assessment of where you're at the moment with that?
I think it's a daily challenge for all of us, and particularly when you're an event that has one show once a year. And it's interesting just with looking at this picture behind us and remembering the conversations we had with Amol and team was we didn't know how many people who came to Wimbledon actually had the Snapchat app. It was a total stab in the dark to see how much content we were going to create and how much did we then need to go out and do it. But the point is, it wasn't worth waiting to see what would happen and saying, well, we'll just see how it goes and then we'll deploy it for next year. If we'd done that, the moment would have passed, we would have been behind. And I think it's constantly straddling this tension between wanting to be not first adopter, not necessarily always an early adopter, but always a best adopter or adopting in the way that makes sense for you so that you can manage your own pace. I think one of the things that we've been continually battling with is how do you test during the year when we have no event, and how can we create compelling test cases, even in partnership with other events. And that's something that potentially we can all do a lot more is collaborate and share learnings. But also how can we test during the event or be comfortable with live tests? And a lot of what we've done in the past 5 years has actually been pretty uncomfortable in terms of when you think about the standards that we hold ourselves to.
And Mihir, give us a sort of industry view on this across your range of clients and partners. Are you sensing, especially after the sort of period we've been through, are you sensing that there is more, and risk-taking is probably the wrong word, but is there a real openness, mood of openness and innovation that you're picking up?
Yeah, I think, look, the pause in programming sort of forced people to think beyond the traditional in any case. When suddenly you didn't have content and you had to think about what you would do, what can you do with archival footage, or how can you engage the community even when there is no live programming, really got everyone, to a certain extent, we've been beating the drum of innovation and social and interactive since 2015. It felt like we were now moving away from evangelism to more people coming to us asking us, what should you be doing? Or, hey, you work with March Madness, what was your experience like? What were the key learnings? Or NASCAR, or Canal Plus, there are different types of partners. You'd be surprised, Golden State Warriors probably is the most tech-first, Silicon Valley organization out there, but even they were reticent in trying out certain things when their audience is the audience that has pretty much created all the proliferation of all the social networks out there. But the part that was exciting for us is that it wasn't just an openness to innovate. It was that they were willing to take chances, and if it didn't work, like continuous innovation is, I think, the point that matters most. It's don't keep doing one-offs and try it out, throw it away, or your sales team goes out there. A brand wants to do some bespoke activation. You get your product team to build it, and it's done. Now next season, try something new. What we're trying to do is empower the product teams and let them do the innovation, and their sales teams can then go sell against that. And I think changing that cycle is probably going to be the only way you can create sort of retention and stickiness, because otherwise, I don't even remember the number of US Open activations that were out there in the last, there was the fan board, there was the, Amex radios, but it's just one-offs. Amex radios has stuck around. That's one of the better ones in stadium. But I think that's the part which has probably changed the most. And what the other thing you see is a lot of organizations are actually hiring specifically for those roles. You saw like Charlotte FC hired a chief fan officer. NBA has a chief fan officer or something to that effect. They are all looking to find ways to engage their fans beyond the traditional.
So once you've picked up the audience and once you've adapted your product or service or content offering to work for that audience, big broad question for you all once again, and we'll start again with you, Mihir. What are the particular challenges around audience retention that you are seeing across the market at the moment?
There's many. I mean, look, my worldview is specifically around the world of digital, so that's where I'll be coming from. There are different answers to this question from a linear standpoint and from a activation and stadium standpoint. But from a digital standpoint, I think the audiences today are sort of used to it. If you just put together a chat experience, just because hey, Twitch does chat, we'll do chat in our app, it's not gonna work, because people. Audiences are smart enough. I mean, if you're just giving me saying, hey, chat within the Wimbledon app versus WhatsApp, for what else am I getting there? Like, is there a reason why I'm in this app? Is there a way for me to engage better with my friends in this app than in WhatsApp? I think those are the key questions. It's not just innovation for the sake of it and throwing it out there. And look, trust me, we found this the hard way, trying to find a solution to a problem that didn't exist with virtual reality. We learn from those experiences, and if someone comes in, spends 5 minutes, love it, what a novelty, and then never come back, there's an issue with it. Maybe your product is not actually working, or maybe there is something else wrong. So how do you learn from that experience and build on top of that? From a retention standpoint, I think, look, we have accepted the fact that people are coming in for content first, at least in the world of traditional sports. Maybe in the world of esports, the community and the experience matters more than the actual content at hand. But in the world of sports, content is first. How do you augment that experience with the rest of the innovation is what matters the most. How do you make it a complementary experience?
Alex, as you mentioned, Wimbledon, almost unique in that you have the 2 weeks of the year. You have an increasing content diet year-round. But there are fans of individual players, there are fans of the sport of tennis, and then there are Wimbledon fans, if you define them as fans. So how do you approach this idea of retention? There's obviously spectators in venue versus viewers watching from afar, however they're watching. How do you sort of square all that?
So I think we had a bit of a penny drop a few years ago, exactly as you just said, realising that not all fans are equal, and therefore you can't possibly measure their retention or their level of engagement with you in the same way, because frankly it completely depends on all sorts of different factors. So starting out by trying to work out what was motivating them to come in. Was it that they are, fans of the sport first and foremost, which is where we had traditionally been focusing a lot of our innovation, a lot of our tech developments? Were they just fans of Wimbledon because it's a great sports event and it's the thing that's on? Are they following particular players? Are they following particular players from certain countries? Are they actually just tuning in to see if David Beckham's going to appear and then go away again? Or are they looking to find out whether the Pimm's has gone up in price? I mean, who knows exactly what it might be? So trying to take that as the baseline and then being realistic in saying, if you think about a solar system, sorry, this is the way that helps me think about it. Our fans who are willing to spend the most amount of time with us are right in the middle, are revolving around the sun, and making sure that we are continuing to bring them back in and giving them what they need. But to a certain extent, they're always going to be there. They are always going to be the people who are applying for tickets first in the ballot, who are queuing up, who are trying to find out what the latest content is on all the apps. Then there are the fans who are totally on the periphery, who are going to be much more variable depending on, is Roger Federer, has he made it all the way through to the final? Is Serena wearing an amazing new outfit? Back to my point about David Beckham. And where we focus a lot of our attention is actually on the people in the middle. And how can you move people from that edge of the outside into the middle and move them from just coming in for a particular day or a particular moment to the 2 weeks and then actually stretching to the 6 weeks. And we're really now trying to talk about Wimbledon as being at the heart of a 6-week celebration rather than just a 2-week event. And interestingly, where our audience has really started to grow is in the week after the tournament takes place, in the week of celebration, because there is so much content, packaging it and finding the right ways to get it to people with the right motivation. That is where a lot of people are coming back and looking for it. And I think to Anmol's point earlier about collaboration with our media partners is also helping us demonstrate to them the value that we're trying to bring back to brand partners as well. So it's complex, but it's simple at its heart, hopefully.
And in terms of that year-round content that you are publishing, and I will point this out on your behalf, and Alex hasn't teed this up, but the US Open final, Raducanu and Fernandez, now, was it a second round qualifying match played at Wimbledon in the girls' tournament 3 or 4 years ago, I think? And
junior match.
Yeah, junior match, and you had the essentially the only footage of them ever playing each other, which, when they both incredibly got to the final, you were able to publish and put out there, and also I think make available to broadcast partners as well. And I guess that's it, taking an individual piece of content like that, is that something that you are publishing for engagement purposes? Is there can you sort of drill down into a commercial value to partners, in whatever way, as a result of publishing that piece of content on that day at a really relevant moment?
Yeah, I think the broad commercial model that we're continually in pursuit of is that if we grow our audience and therefore grow the value of our audience, and we continue to keep our brand where it is in terms of its premium appeal, we will grow commercial value over time for our partners and for our media partners, rather than looking to package things up in more of an ad hoc kind of way. So if we can keep the Wimbledon audience as broad as it is, as passionate as it is, and engaged as it is, and nurture the various different pockets as we've discussed, then ultimately we'll find more and more ways to provide more value back to our partners. That's the model we're in pursuit of. In terms of that example, we have flip-flopped around how active we should or shouldn't be during the rest of the year, and particularly around the time of the other Grand Slams, because the feedback from fans is generally, go away Wimbledon, it's the US Open, I want to hear from the US Open or the Australian Open or Roland Garros. Stop muscling in on their territory. So turning it on its head and actually saying, how can we be in support of the rest of the sport? And you had this unbelievable narrative taking place in New York, in many ways an extension of what had started at Wimbledon with Emma's amazing performance there. And we had this content, why not make it available? We gave it to the USTA to use on their channels, we gave it to the media partners, rather than sort of being protective of it and saying, well, we're just going to put it here and try and eke every last drop out of it. And I think that's something we can all do more of. We did something similar with the ICC when the Cricket World Cup final and Wimbledon final took place on the same day in 2019. So how are we all contributing to the big pie, as well as nurturing our own bits of it?
That was a day, Alex, when I was memorably stuck on a train.
Oh. I'm sorry for you.
Missed it all.
But hopefully you were able to second screen.
Just what I was going to say.
Yes.
Just what I was going to say. Anmol, tell us about retention from a Snapchat point of view. How do you do it? What are some things that you've picked up over time in terms of how to get to, the enormous numbers that you're hitting now?
Yeah, so audience is very young. I think today 90% of our users are under the age of 25. For anyone with a teenage kid in this room, the average attention span for a teenager is 8 seconds on mobile. The average attention span for a goldfish is 9 seconds. So our biggest competitor, our biggest challenge is competing with time. And on mobile, any app is just one click away. So our goal on Snapchat is to be fun, innovative, and creative, particularly for young people. They are flexible, they are fickle, and we have to be up to date with what's going on in that generation in a really, really important way. So when we think about like our pillars I mentioned earlier, opening the camera, communicating is kind of our utility. Coming to Snapchat to talk to your best friends and family in an authentic way. We are a ephemeral platform. Everything goes away, and there's no feedback loop. So there's no public likes or comments. I think because of that, people feel way more comfortable coming to Snapchat to be their themselves and be authentic with no real pressure. So that's really, really important to us. That's kind of our core value. From there, we try and drive a really fun content experience, very innovative AR experience, and all of those elements kind of keep our platform, I think, super engaged for people to come back to and feel in a safe place to create content and talk to their best friends.
And in terms of those partnerships with rights holders, what do the best rights holder platform partnerships look like? What are you looking for?
Yeah, they're collaborative with us. And we were talking about earlier, right? Like, we hope that, similar to what Alex did years ago, walk up a staircase with us that's not fully built yet, right? So we don't know exactly where, that story would have ended up. But to Alex's point, if we didn't test it that year or try it, we would have been behind the ball the following year. So working with partners that are willing to kind of embrace our creativity, embrace our young audience. And then on our side, Alex and team know Wimbledon's fans and their audiences way better than we do. So how do we collaborate on that front with them? Example I'll give in the US is ESPN with SportsCenter. So SportsCenter is an iconic brand. When I was growing up, coming back home and watching the 6 p.m. show on TV was appointment television. Over the years, it's obviously evolved in many different ways. You can watch highlights in different places across social. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we created SportsCenter on Snapchat. And what that really was is reimagining that brand, that established IP for our platform, but thinking it in a way that caters to young people, right? So again, not a 30-minute show, a 3 to 5 minute show, not just highlights, a lot more about culture and fun and fashion and who's dating who and who's getting traded and what are they wearing, which makes a lot more sense for Snapchatters. And I'll give big kudos to our partners like that and others where they are willing to go a little bit further away from traditional kind of this is our IP, this is what we've done over the last 20, 30, 40 years, and embrace kind of our way of thinking on Snapchat, which is to be different and try and find new ways to connect with fans. And again, our goal is that next generation of young people.
And Alex, from your point of view, what's that optimum relationship with a platform like Snapchat or any of the big platforms? What do you need from them?
Time. No, I think helping us find ways to continue to deliver on our long-term objectives, which sort of said at the beginning, keeping Wimbledon relevant and demonstrating that your perception of it may be this traditional event where everyone dresses up smartly and drinks champagne, but actually it's got all of these other different amazing facets to it. And all the different ways that we can bring them to life through all of the different tools that we have. And I think we're just in such an incredible position if you look at the acceleration of the industry, all of the cliches of coming out of the pandemic and things having been forced to transform. The whole digital collectible space, Matt is here, we did a partnership with Andy Murray as a complete test. I don't think we had any idea how it was going to go, but it was too good an opportunity not to go after. And so I think from the partners, from the platforms, from all of the people, it's being willing to be brave and go after it because it's changing so quickly.
We've got some audience questions and they are good. So I'm going to read them out. Mihir, Carlo DeMarcus, maybe the best dressed person in the room. What a scarf. Carlo would like to ask you, what's the LiveLike plan to become a leader?
You know, the flywheel has just started turning. The way I think about it is, as I mentioned before, we've been banging this drum for a while. Alex knows, Anmol knows. We've been saying these things for a while. I feel like there's been a momentum shift in the past 12 months. I wouldn't like to think of, people would say like, oh, do you have a COVID bump? That's not how I would like to classify it, but honestly, there's a clear shift. And the more people we work with, the more partners. I mean, today it's no longer us going to people and saying, do this. It's them asking us what we should be doing. So we're almost advisors, strategists in the process with them. And that doesn't relate just to the LiveLike platform, right? It is, how should you be using social media? How should you be using other platforms like a WSC or a Greenfly? Like, there are so many good tech partners out there. And if you see, like, in the last 5 years or so, in the 2014 to 2016 period, there was so much money that was going into seed stage companies in sport tech. I think that has slowed down a little bit, and you can see that the ones that are there with the staying power are now still there, and the rest have sort of fallen off the map. And those ones that are still there are sort of addressing different parts of the same value chain. So from our perspective, what we're saying is, how should we be partnering with those companies to provide more value to our rights holders? So, we have a partnership with Delta Tray. Clearly, their video player is best in class. We are providing them our tools to make their video player stay relevant even for the future. We have a partnership with Sportradar. They have launched a new betting SDK that is built on top of LiveLike's technology, because that's their core IP, their data. How did they let their data come to life in a betting context? From my perspective, I want to democratize access to innovation. It shouldn't just be the purview of big tech and e-commerce and gaming companies. Anyone and everyone out there should be able to use community engagement, gamification, the growth metrics, the growth tactics that companies in Silicon Valley have been using for a few years now, for a decade or two now. We are providing those to anyone and everyone who wants it. So it's not about whether LiveLike is in the room. It's, do we let our partners, whether that's a rights holder, whether that's a club, whether that's a tech platform, do we let them do more, build better products? And from my perspective, that actually makes it slightly easier to scale as well, because then I don't need to be in the room every single time. Delta Tray can talk to BT, BN, Sinclair, their partners, and say, if you want gamification, if you want community, we have the right tool set for it.
Question from Christian Fizia to you, Alex. How much do you look towards the other Grand Slams for inspiration on trends, and how are they retaining and monetizing fans? Are there different models in play?
Great question, and I think some of this is about defining your inspiration set versus your competitive set. And I think if you probably asked that question 10 years ago, we would sort of say, well, yeah, we're always looking at them so that we can do better. And actually where I think we are now is that we're looking at each other and we're learning from each other and we're supporting each other, because it's in all of our interests to create these, hopefully mini bumps in the general sort of consumption of tennis and the sport as a whole. The pressures and the priorities are naturally different. I think the US team would be okay with me saying that they are a much more commercial organisation than we are, and they've therefore developed their digital experiences accordingly. Mihir was mentioning some of them. They create value for their partners all of the time. We have a very different philosophy and approach. The thing I'm not sure anyone's quite settled on is this idea of is there such thing as a universal sports database or a universal fan audience for a particular sport that you could then be moving around the events. As I mentioned, one of the things that makes Wimbledon strong is our ability to punch above that and out of that, and therefore we need to be looking at Barcelona and Real Madrid and certain NFL teams or baseball teams or basketball teams who have that same ability rather than just in tennis.
Are you looking outside sports as well?
Yeah, I mean, some of these big cultural things, I confess I need to watch, what's it called? The Netflix show, everyone's gone.
Squid Games?
Squid Games. I haven't watched it. I need to watch it. But what is it about that?
I'm glad somebody got that, because we could have spent quite a lot of time just shouting out the names of Netflix shows.
The Crown.
but we've had these conversations. It's not Love Island over here. It's not necessarily British Bake Off over here, but it's these things that capture people's imagination. And why is that? And how do you make it repeatable? Wimbledon is a repeatable event, and finding different lenses to bring people in, but not, to your point, just being in pursuit of one-off fads.
Philip Sharp from Infront X asks you a question, Anmol. How does Snap monetize its relationship with sports brands? And also, how do you resolve any partner-sponsor conflicts that might be involved?
Yeah, great question. So I think when we do a partnership with the NFL, with the NBA, with Wimbledon, with the IOC, with ESPN, whoever, a couple things. We kind of identify a programming plan where we're going to cover for that season, for that tournament. So for the NBA, let's use that as an example. We'll say every game day throughout the season we'll do a show based around highlights. We might do a culture-based show. We might do an original during the finals. And then, with some of these leagues and rights holders and broadcasters, they might have official sponsor kind of restrictions in the sense that they have to get a first look. So basically what we do is kind of identify that process and say, hey, we can give those top 10 brands a first look window of 15, 20, 30 days. And then what we really like to do is, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, we know our audience very well. Our sales team knows our audience very well. Our partners know their brands very well. So how do we collaborate to make sure that we're maximizing monetization opportunities between the Snapchat portion of these brands and then the broader kind of partner portion of it? So it's usually a very collaborative process, and our goal is to try to maximize as much as we can from a brand standpoint.
We've just got a few minutes left. I really like this question from Mark Riley. Thank you, Mark. What's your most important metric, and is it the right one? So I'm just going to give you a couple of moments to consider that. And Mihir, I'm going to come to you first. What's your most important metric, and is it the right one?
We track everything in terms of engagement. Our goal is to make our partners' audience stickier. How do you convert your audience to fans? And I think fans can mean many different things. I'm a fan of Roger Federer. I'm a fan of Wimbledon. I'm a fan of On shoes because I'm a fan of Roger Federer. But to a certain extent, engaged MAUs is the metric that we are measuring ourselves on. Like how many engaged MAUs are going through the LiveLike system every month. I mean, I guess it's MAUs, but and is that number growing? Because that's the measure of whether we are creating value for our partners. It is definitely the right one since it's ours. So that's, yeah.
Alex, is it PIM's consumption?
Definitely not by me, because there is none, sadly. I don't think it exists yet. I think what we're in pursuit of is some kind of definition of content appreciation. Because, as I was saying, for us, monthly active users is a great metric, but doesn't really apply because to the same earlier points, we have to be realistic around the level of engagement we're going to generate with a live event and outside of a live event. Mm-hmm. And cancellation of Wimbledon in 2020 taught us that we had no live event. Therefore, we didn't necessarily have a story to tell. But there were still things that we could do to engage that audience, empower them, give them their voice that they appreciated. And this is something that exists from a physical guest attendance perspective, something we've worked really hard on. One of my colleagues is actually here today, Sheila, to try and identify how people feel about their Wimbledon experience. If we could somehow create a measure of that in the digital world and the online world, then you start to compare that with time spent and new audiences coming in and where they're coming from. And that could actually help inform your content strategies in a much more useful way than just, someone only watched it for 2 seconds.
Yeah, really interesting. Anmol?
I'll give you two answers. So the first one, I think from like a content standpoint is probably loyalty. So I think it's very easy on Snapchat's Discover platform to create a clickbaity tile that gets someone to come in for that one snap, which might drive your uniques number up in a big way. But we care more about either completing that whole piece of content from start to finish and coming back to that partner, to that brand multiple times per week. I think that's a lot harder to do. That's what we're optimizing towards, and that's our goal with our content partners. Like drive sort of this experience that people trust your storytelling capabilities and want to come back for more throughout that week and that month and that year. I think the second answer is more of like a strategy or focus for us. So it's sort of a little bit of a cop-out, but I think just innovation. Like for us, our biggest differentiator is being ahead of the curve, I think, and our mantra internally is just trying to be innovative and creative on everything that we do. I think if our deal looks the same last year as it does this year, then we failed, right? We've done the same thing over again, and it's not going to work with our audience. So a huge thing for us and a huge kind of internal metric is thinking outside the box and being creative.
Good stuff. We have run out of time. It's been a really fascinating conversation. So Mihir, Alex, Amol, thank you so much. Our next session starts in about 20 minutes time on this stage. We're going in venue to have a look at the fan experience there and how that's changing with Musco. So do be back for that. But for now, do thank our panelists.